They're eating her. And then they're going to eat me. Oh my God.
Oh boy. Here we go. If you're a long-time subscriber to this channel, then you know that we've been counting down the greatest horror movies of all time. Each year we rank the top 10, starting from 1970 to insert current year here. After making our way through the 70s and 80s, revisiting such classics as The Exorcist, Halloween, and The Shining, we've now made our way to the greatest decade for horror yet, the good old 90s.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too!
And yes, that is sarcasm that you have detected. This was a horrible decade. Or at least, not the best decade.
What the?
One of the key reasons behind the long-standing fascination with horror is that every era of the genre provides insight into what that particular generation was afraid of, and what was considered taboo. From a modern perspective, the 70s and 80s remain of particular fascination, as this period really blew the door open on what horror films were allowed to do. So, what happened in the 1990s? The most iconic franchises of the time fizzled out. The great filmmakers of the past 2 decades all seemed to hit dry spells. It was as if the genre itself suffered an identity crisis. Movies which try to preserve the spirit of years gone by frequently failed. Those which try to do something new typically came up wanting. This is not to suggest that there was no great horror in the 90s. On the contrary, this is why we're here. We'll eventually make our way through the entire decade, but for now, this is the 10 best horror movies of 1990. Mention The Exorcist in a conversation, and most horror fans will declare it the scariest film of all time. While that declaration is well deserved, a film that is quite often overlooked when it comes to the legacy of that film is the third film in the series, The Exorcist III. While wisely ignoring the events of The Exorcist II, The Heretic, The Exorcist III did what very few sequels were able to do, and did it with an intense amount of fervor. It rose to the challenge of not only living up to the original, but it could be argued, it actually improves on the original in some ways, giving a solid, well-told story of a detective caught up between a personal battle between his faith, a murderer, a demon, and a familiar face from the past. Five medical students experiment with near-death experiences until the dark consequences of past tragedies begin to jeopardize their lives. It's much to the filmmaker's credit that Flatliners, for all its crazy excess, does not turn into camp. Despite 2 or 3 bad laughs, the picture retains a basic conviction. The flatlining scenes are all crackling with tension because they are always torn in between the thrill of important discoveries and the obvious danger of what the students do. The ecstasy of absolute truths versus the recklessness of their project. It's a very interesting dynamic. Whenever the students aren't flatlining themselves, they are also endangered, being prowled upon by their ghosts. Terrifyingly real, freakishly unforgettable, this is one of director Joel Schumacher's best movies. Yes, even better than Batman and Robin.
This is too weird. Weird. We've experienced death. Now somehow we brought our sins back physically. And they're pissed.
A medical student sets out to recreate his decapitated fiancée by building her a new body made of Manhattan streetwalkers. If you haven't already surmised, Frankenhooker lives squarely in the realm of the absurd, certainly more comedy than horror. It also serves as a time capsule of Times Square before it got cleaned up. They just don't make them like this anymore. Also, if you take into consideration the way the movie ends, it makes an interesting statement on the objectification of women and how you need to show respect. It is an interesting message buried in what is ostensibly an exploitation flick. If you have not seen this movie, make sure you put it on your to-see list immediately. You will not be let down.
Need some company? Going out? On a date? Party? Got any money?
Why some people dislike Gremlins 2 will forever be a mystery. Sure, it's entirely different from its predecessor, but only in good ways. It's weird, it's fun, and it even lampoons the original. Taking place in an elaborate big city skyscraper instead of a small town, returning director Joe Dante's follow-up finds the titular creatures causing insane amounts of mayhem as they take over the building. Now, let's just recap some of the more memorable moments of this film. We have Hulk Hogan putting a bunch of gremlins in their place at the movie theater. We have film critic Leonard Maltin, who panned the original, appearing briefly and getting mauled. We have a sexy lady gremlin. We also have a big musical number during which hundreds of gremlins sing along to Frank Sinatra's New York, New York. It's sublime.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I wanna be a part of it. New York, New York.
It's true. Technically, it's not a movie, it's a miniseries, but for all intents and purposes, we're calling it a movie. The movie was originally broadcast on ABC in late 1990. It was a 2-night event, and we're willing to bet thousands upon thousands of people lost sleep for far more than 2 nights. The movie starts off with a little girl singing an itsy bitsy spider in her backyard where her mother has hung the laundry out to dry. This, my friends, is where we get our very first glimpse of the premium nightmare fuel that is Pennywise. Originating from Stephen King's terrifying book, It, this fellow right here is the reason many people are plagued by chlorophobia. That and the fact that clowns in general are just really creepy.
I'm every nightmare you ever had. I am your worst dream come true. I'm everything you ever were afraid of.
A troubled young man is drawn to a mythical place called Midian, where a variety of friendly monsters are hiding from humanity. Clive Barker's seminal monster movie has always been a bit of a curate's egg. Studio interference and recutting played the production, and the finished product wasn't finished at all, merely stopped. Thankfully, fairly recent investigations have recovered a large part of the footage hacked from the film, and a director's cut has been available for the last couple of years that goes some significant way towards fixing the problems of the original movie, specifically when it comes to pacing, characterization, and the film's climax. Looking back on it, Nightbreed is not a particularly scary movie. It will not leave you afraid to go into a darkened room. It will make you think about how we define monsters and how we observe ourselves. Viewers who have never seen Nightbreed will enjoy the movie and the opportunity to sympathize with the citizens of Midian. Those who have seen the theatrical release will love the new version.
It's true. Everything's true. God's an astronaut. Oz is over the rainbow. And Midian's where the monsters live.
Child's Play 2 knows exactly what it is. It knows it's dealing with a sassy killer doll, and it fully embraces that path. It doesn't have to hide Chucky's true nature from us like the first film did in its first few acts and initial marketing campaign. In fact, it begins at the good guy factory and seems to ratchet up the more playful elements of the universe from frame 1. The film is brighter, more colorful, and runs at a brisk pace. The initial kill, a technician being electrocuted during the process of animating Chucky, perfectly sets up the film's mix of youthful whimsy and adult cynicism. By totally scrapping the murder mystery angle that made the original so wobbly, Child's Play 2 manages to be a damn sight more fun to watch.
You've been very naughty, Miss Campbell.
Unfortunately for the quaint desert town of Perfection, Nevada, their name is a total misnomer in this cult classic horror, thanks to the presence of the prehistoric underground worms who pay a visit to terrorize the 15 residents of the town. The irony of the entire film is the fact that these creatures live underground and travel by burrowing around this town, which used to be relying on mining. Devoid of eyes, the creatures hunt and travel by way of sound, picking up on vibrations underground in order to track down their prey. Tremors is actually 2 movies in one. On its own terms, it's an enjoyable modern sci-fi horror thriller with good pacing and a sense of humor. But it's also a loving tribute to such 1950s low-budget desert-based sci-fi films like Tarantula, It Came From Outer Space,
and The Monolith Monsters.
All in all, this is what a movie of its ilk is supposed to be like, and it's terrific.
They're gonna get him!
Val, stop! They're coming! Be quiet! Don't move!
Mourning his dead child, a haunted Vietnam War veteran attempts to uncover his past while suffering from a severe case of dissociation. To do so, he must decipher reality and life from his own dreams, delusions, and perceptions of death. This is a very unique movie. It is a curiosity, a mutant of a movie in an industry that specializes in clones. One of the great treats of Jacob's Ladders is his visuals, and no better sequence exemplifies this more than Jacob's trip to hell. Being whisked away on a stretcher, the imagery surrounding him becomes more frightening and bizarre. Psychotics, deformed human beings, severed limbs, and a man whose head shakes wildly in an almost surreal fashion, something that has become sort of a cliche since. And the infamous shot of the eyeless doctor holding a syringe filled with unnamed chemicals. Unfairly dismissed during its initial release, this movie really deserves to be better known. The ultimate example of bad trip mainstream cinema. In Rob Reiner's film adaptation of the Stephen King story, Anne Wilkes is a loner, a former maternity nurse, and an obsessed fan of the popular writer Paul Sheldon. At the beginning of the flick, she rescues him from a car wreck and forces him to bring his most famous character back from the dead, with the threat of increasingly painful forms of bodily mutilation if he refuses. For pure teeth-gritted, fist-clench intensity, it doesn't get more perfect than Misery. It's impossible to relax at any point in this film, and once things hit the proverbial fan, the tension meter goes through the roof. It's like the opposite of a home invasion flick, because the protagonist is trapped inside someone else's house. Nearly the entire film takes place inside said house, and that's what makes it so claustrophobic and unpleasant. And the less we talk about hobbling, the better.
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake.
It's for the best.
Eddie, please!
Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to let us know your favorite horror movie of the year in the comment section below.